Hi everyone, this is Brad here, and today we're going to be covering one of my favorite items or features in MetaField, and that is batch editing data in the system. This applies to field forms and lab test forms. Before we begin, I just want to call out that I'm presenting on version 2023.4. So if you're looking at this and it doesn't match exactly what you're doing, chances are you might be on a different version, but hopefully it's pretty straightforward either way. MetaField comes with a handful of out-of-box features and bells and whistles, and that includes batch editing for some of the tests that also are out-of-box. So an easy example of that might be, if we just take a look at, say, density testing as an example. So basically what I've done is I've drilled down into a dummy project that I have here in my sandbox. I'm in quality control, and we're just looking at density testing for now. So we've got a bunch of nuclear gauge density testing. Each one of these is an individual test. But an example of what I'm talking about is really with this button up here called Batch Edit. So as you can see, I can certainly look at one individual test at a time and make changes, right? So I have access into this individual test. A proctor can be changed, that type of thing. That's okay, but again, if you want to do things in batch, there's an alternative. So here's a case where, again, you're a project manager, you might review that, an incorrect proctor was used, or, maybe the probe depth should be adjusted. If you have a number of records, you can come here, select all of them, and there'll be a batch edit button. So as you do this, the system is going to present to you this table where you now have all of the records that you have selected as a row. And of course, you can tab and key your way through some of these, but you're looking at multiple. But the whole batch editing feature is really applicable towards the column that you're looking at. So again, here's an example where I have a proctor. Well, what if that proctor was, maybe expired, or maybe one even wasn't applied yet? You have the opportunity to use this little arrow at the top and populate an entire column. Well, of course, I'm using a new proctor here. We're going to get a message that new specs are going to be updated. Just go ahead and hit update, and you've made a change to the entire column. So that type of usage, may not be applicable to every single one of these columns, but for ones that do have a common value throughout all of these selections, it's very useful. And of course, just hit save, and I've updated my record, or records, I should say. But really what I want to show you is how to configure beyond that, right? We want to look at ones for, various test forms and custom forms that a user may have created in the system. So how do we do that? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to be opening up the individual form that we want to batch edit. So what we're going to do is I am going to open up, I think I might do like a masonry inspection. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a tour into administration, and where I've built out my masonry inspection here is going to be underneath activity, and then my sub tab here called forms. And I'm going to go ahead and find the one that I have as an example. I think, let's take a look here. I think I have one under this one. All right, yep, so here's a masonry inspection. So what we're going to be doing is, you can see I've drilled down into this area called Form Designer, and it's really this button here. This is the key button, and this is the button you want to look for your field forms and your lab test forms. So we'll cover both. But when I click this button, you can see right here, actually I already have it selected. I'm going to get rid of it so we can kind of start over. But I'm going to open this up, and when I click add, the system is going to give me a couple of different options here. It's this guy right here that I want to select, batch data entry. Now what happens is it's going to present you kind of this drag and drop screen, or you can just push them over. All of these fields that you see are actually the fields. It's kind of faint gray in the background, but they are the fields that you have built out towards the form. So what this allows you to do is you can dictate which fields you want to include as part of batch editing. Not all of them have to be batch edited at once. So you can see I'm just going to grab a handful of these here, just kind of push them over, or you can use one of these arrows to push them all over. Right, so there's weather, things like that. So I'll just kind of pick and choose, push some of them over, and hit save. Okay, so what does that do for me now? Well, what we want to do is change gears a little bit. We want to put kind of the hat of a project manager on and allow ourselves to maybe batch edit this data. So let's go look at a masonry inspection form, or better yet, multiple versions of this masonry inspection form. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to back out and I'm going to go into a project where I have a lot of these masonry inspection forms. So let's go ahead and open this up. Here again, I just have a dummy project that we're working with. A lot of different types of activities here. Let's see if we can find some masonry. So, there's some masonry inspections. Now, the way the batch editing tool is going to work is if you look up here, notice that you don't see one yet, right? There's no batch edit button. How do I enable that button? Well, what you want to do is isolate to the form itself. And there's a couple of ways that you can do that. First, you can run a search up here for that masonry form. So I think I got a couple there. I got to get rid of some. But go ahead and apply that there, or you can also just select it down here by clicking masonry inspection, and you can see it auto-populates. So now that we're working with just masonry inspection forms, now I have this batch edit button. So this is a case again where I can grab all of the records in question and click batch edit. And we're going to get a similar screen here that we saw originally with, say, like a density test. And the same is going to be applied. Okay. So here they all are. Of course, we can adjust these. I got my little arrows at the top, but here's your batch editing tool. Now, the other thing that I forgot to mention when we were creating these fields for batch editing, you also have the ability to arrange the order from left to right. It's going to be on that same screen. So if we take a quick step back, again, we'll go into administration. Let's find our form. Right, so we'll open up the masonry inspection. We'll click form settings. Just click edit here. And notice this right here. Click and drag columns above to reorder them. So from left to right on our previous screen, you're going to have the option to drag and drop whichever order you want to work with. So again, maybe you have like the project, the technician or the inspector at the top, and just kind of work your way through. So something to be mindful of. Now, the other thing that we want to show is how do you do this for lab testing, right? So it's the very same concept. It's just your lab test forms are going to be in a different area of administration. So again, let's go to admin. You saw me just go underneath activity forms. Really, activity is for your field forms, different types of inspections, observations out in the field. But for your lab test forms, they're going to be buried here underneath limbs/samples. So same concept. Let's go ahead and click test forms this time. And I'm going to look for a specific test form. So I'm just going to keep it simple, and there's one that I want to search. You can just run by the standard. So I'm just going to look at this soil wash form. Let's go ahead and open this up. And again, it's going to look very similar to our masonry inspection in terms of how, kind of the experience. Again, it's this button right here, right? Form settings. So let's go ahead and click form settings, and we can see this one's already been configured, batch data entry, right? So we did this last time. We can close out of it and start over, click add. It's this one right here that we're looking for. Let's add the setting, and it's the same concept that we had with our masonry inspection. So again, you're going to have all of these fields in the background that you can kind of see that are part of the form itself. You have the opportunity to drag over which fields you want to include for batch data entry. It doesn't have to be everything. It can if you want. Let's go ahead and hit save. So I just threw a few in there as an example, but now let's go into the lab and actually see what it's like to do this. So we'll back out. We'll go into the lab area. We'll go find that form here in our material work queues. And they're actually already populated, but so here's the form that we just made some adjustments to, right? So we have it filtered. Here are some examples. Now that we've applied some batch editing data or editing fields to the form level, we have the ability to multi-select these individual tests. So originally, if you can only select one, when you click enter test results, it's going to bring up that individual screen. It's kind of the desktop, right? So here's that test. You can certainly go in and add your data, right? So that's one at a time. But if you're doing a specific test, and you want to come back to your workstation after you've done, a dozen of them, come back to your workstation. You'll have the ability to grab multiple tests. You can see there's a bunch there, or maybe we just stick with the few here for now. All you need to do now is click enter test results, and it's going to pull the ones that you have selected, and you're going to get this table format. Okay. And again, it's going to stop just because I only added a couple, but if we added all of them, you're going to have the opportunity to do this in batch. So you can do this with any lab test form in the system. Pretty easy to configure. But that's pretty much it. So if you have any questions, comments, things like that, of course, lots of ways to reach out to support, customer success, or support portal. Again, we also have our help section up here. Lots of good material inside of there as well. But that's pretty much it. So thank you very much. Hopefully this was helpful.